Leia walked alone through the shining streets of her home city on the alien planet called Varela, her feet soft on the silver tiles beneath her. Her eyes low and her thoughts heavy. Tall towers surrounded her, built from crystal and light, glowing under the twin suns above, but none of that beauty could lift her heart. She passed other Tharkai girls with smooth purple skin and strong shoulders, laughing in groups, their long robes flowing behind them, each of them perfect in every way that their people valued. They were proud, healthy, and selected from birth to carry forward the strongest bloodlines of their race. But Leia was not like them. Her skin was too pale and her body too thin. A small limp in her right leg made her walk unevenly. Her voice was soft and shy, and her eyes were too wide with wonder, not sharp like the others. From the day she could walk and speak, she was told she was not right, not fit, not enough. The elders of her city decided who could join the breeding lines and who could not. And when she turned 15, they gave their final word. Leia was marked as a failure. She was told no male would ever choose her, that she was not breeding material, that she would serve only as a helper or scribe. Never a mother. Her parents tried to hide their shame, but they could not hide the way their smiles faded when they looked at her. In public, they stood apart, pretending not to notice when others whispered and stared. Other girls laughed as she passed, calling her names like Ghostskin and Limpa. Her only friend had moved to another city. Last year, Leia spent most of her days inside the Great Archive, reading old stories and learning about other worlds. She especially liked the stories about Earth and the humans who came there long ago. Humans were strange and wild, with so many shapes and sizes, some with scars and strange features, but still full of fire and life. She dreamed of meeting one, but that dream felt far away, like the stars above. Something to look at but never touch. Her life was decided, quiet and small, nothing more. She would live alone, die alone, and no one would remember her. But one morning, everything changed. A message came from the High Council, sealed with gold and blue light. It said she was selected for a new exchange mission between Varela and the Human Alliance. Her role was simple: assist in communication and cultural exchange on a human vessel for 30 days. Then return. Leia stared at the message for a long time. Sure, it was a mistake, but no correction came. Her name was on the list, and transport would arrive in 2 days. Her mother nodded without a word. Her father said to pack only what she needed. No hugs, no wishes of luck. Just silence when the day came. Leia stood on the edge of the landing field, a small bag over her shoulder, the sky above her humming with the sound of the arriving ship. It was massive and dark silver, shaped like a blade cutting through the clouds. She had never seen anything like it. Of the Tharkai, chosen for the mission, stood nearby, proud and perfect as always, whispering about her with sideways glances. She tried to ignore them. She looked down at her reflection on the metal floor, saw her thin arms and tired eyes, and wondered again why they had picked her. The ship landed with a soft hiss and a door opened slowly. Bright light spilled out and the first humans stepped forward. Tall and short, pale and dark, wearing simple uniforms and carrying tools. Their eyes scanned the group, friendly but curious. Then she saw him. A human male stepped out, not very tall, not very strong, but with calm eyes and a small smile. He looked over the Tharkai group, then his gaze paused on her for a moment. Their eyes met and he nodded, just once, like he was saying hello. Leia blinked and looked away quickly, her heart beating faster than it should. She told herself it meant nothing, just politeness. Humans were known for that. Still, the moment stayed in her mind as she followed the others up the ramp into the ship, each step echoing in the metal halls, each breath tight in her chest. The inside of the ship was clean and bright, filled with strange sounds and lights. Humans moved quickly, speaking in their own language. The air smelled different, sharper and warmer. It was not like home, but it felt alive. Leia was given a small room and a set of clothes, told to rest and prepare for her tasks the next day. She sat on the soft bed and looked around. Everything was new and strange and unknown, but for the first time in a long time, she did not feel trapped. Somewhere deep inside her, a small spark of hope began to burn, and she did not want it to go out. The morning light streamed through the small window of Leia's room on the human ship and warmed her face gently. She woke slowly, her heart still racing from the night before when she first stepped onto this strange craft far from Varela. Today was the start of her real work, but a cloud of nerves hovered over her like a heavy fog. She dressed carefully in the simple uniform given to her, its fabric soft but unfamiliar against her skin. Stepping out into the corridor, she felt the hum of the ship beneath her feet. Smooth metal walls stretched ahead and around, filled with blinking lights and quiet voices. The strange language of the humans echoed in soft waves. Leah walked slowly down the hall, careful to keep her limp hidden as best as she could. She did not want to stand out more than she already did. Every glance from the other Tharkai felt like a sharp blade, and the humans were still a mystery, sometimes friendly, but sometimes cold. Her first meeting was with the mission leader, a tall human woman named Captain Richards, who spoke clearly and with strength. She welcomed Leia in a room full of tables and holograms, showing images of her and Earth, the two planets now linked by fragile peace and hope. Captain Richards said, "Your role is important, Leah. You will help us learn about your people and teach us what we need to know about yours." Leah nodded, but her voice came out soft and uncertain, the weight of the task pressing on her chest like heavy stones. After the meeting, Leia was left to explore the ship, her eyes wide as she watched humans move around with purpose. Some carrying tools, others speaking into small devices. A few sat alone, staring out windows at the black stars. The silence between them spoke of homes far away. As she walked through the corridors, she felt a presence near her, and turning, she saw him, the young human she noticed on the landing day, the one named James. His eyes calm and kind as he smiled gently at her. James said, "Hello, Leia. I'm glad to see you awake and well. The journey must have been long and tiring." His voice was soft, like a quiet song, and it made her feel less alone in this strange place. Leia wanted to answer, but her throat felt tight. So she only nodded and smiled back shyly. James laughed quietly, a sound warm and honest. "Don't be afraid. I'm here to help," he said. And those words settled inside her heart like a small seed. In the following days, Leia found herself working closely with James, translating Tharkai customs and explaining her people's stories. She was surprised to find him patient and curious, never rushing her or judging her mistakes. He listened carefully whenever she spoke, asking questions that made her think the other humans seemed polite but distant, busy with their own work, and the Tharkai crew still avoided her, their cold glances reminding her of the words spoken long ago by the elders. Yet with James, something was different, something she had never known before. One afternoon, they were in the ship's library, a quiet room filled with floating screens and ancient texts. James was reading a story Leia had told him about Varella's history, his eyes shining with wonder. "Your world is beautiful, full of life and strength," he said softly. "I want to understand more." Leia felt her cheeks warm. No human had ever said such things to her before. She was used to pity or silence, but James's words were full of respect, and she began to hope that maybe there was a place for her here, even if it was far from home. But the past was never far behind. One day, while walking through the ship's corridors, Leia overheard some humans talking quietly about the Tharkai, their voices full of surprise and doubt. "She doesn't look like the others," one said. "Is she really part of the mission?" Her heart sank, but she kept walking, trying not to show the sting of their words. She felt like an outsider again, caught between two worlds that did not fully accept her. That evening, James found her sitting alone near a window, looking out at the stars. He sat beside her without saying anything at first, watching the dark sky filled with distant lights. Finally, he spoke. "You are not alone, Leah. Sometimes the hardest battles are the ones inside our own hearts," he said gently. "I don't see the things others see. I see who you really are." Leia turned to look at him, her eyes wide and searching. "But they told me I am not enough, that no one would want me. Not a human or a Tharkai," she whispered. "How can I believe otherwise?" James smiled softly. "Because I see your strength, your kindness, and your courage to be here. That is more than enough for me." His words felt like a warm light inside the cold darkness she carried. For the first time since she arrived on this ship, Leia allowed herself to believe that maybe she could be wanted. Maybe she could belong. But the mission was only beginning, and dangers lurked ahead, unknown to her yet. The path she walked was full of shadows and light, and she would have to choose which to follow as the stars blinked silently outside. Leah closed her eyes and took a deep breath, ready to face whatever came next. Leah woke early in the ship's quiet quarters. The soft hum of the engines, a constant reminder that she was far from home. The strange smells of the human vessel filled her nose and made her feel both curious and uneasy. Today would be another day of work. But her mind kept drifting to James and the kindness he showed her. She dressed slowly, her movements careful and deliberate, wanting to appear strong even when she felt fragile inside. The limp in her leg bothered her more than usual, but she hid it well as she left her room and moved down the hall toward the common area, where James and others gathered. James was already there when she arrived. sitting with a small group of humans. But when he saw her, his face brightened, and he stood up quickly, offering a seat beside him. "Good morning, Leah," he said warmly. "Are you ready for today?" Leah nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "I think so," she replied, sitting down and feeling a strange flutter in her chest. It was new to her, this feeling of belonging. Even for a moment, was something she never expected to find on this mission. Their work began with translating ancient texts from her people's history. James asked many questions, eager to understand every word and story. His curiosity was sincere and gentle, never rushed or impatient like others she had met before. As they worked side by side, Leah found herself relaxing, telling small stories about her childhood, about the stars they watched at night, about the music that played in the markets of Varela. James listened closely, smiling often, and sometimes laughing softly at her shy jokes. One afternoon, as the ship glided silently through space, Leah told James about a tradition among the Tharkai, where young girls would paint their faces with shimmering colors before a special ceremony. She described the bright blues and golds that shone under the twin suns, the laughter and dancing that filled the night. James's eyes sparkled with interest. "That sounds beautiful, Leah. I wish I could see it someday," he said, his voice filled with wonder. Leah felt a warmth spread through her, the kind that made her heart beat faster and her cheeks flush pink. She looked at him and saw something she had never noticed before, a softness in his eyes that reached out to her, not as a stranger or a duty, but as a friend who cared deeply. She felt a spark of hope flicker to life inside her. For days, their meetings became a small, bright spot in Leah's life, a place where she could forget the harsh words of the elders and the cold stares of others. She began to dream of a different future, one where she was not judged by her limp or her pale skin, but loved for who she was. One evening, after a long day of work, James invited Leah to join him on the ship's observation deck. A large window looked out into the endless blackness of space, dotted with sparkling stars that seemed close enough to touch. They stood side by side in silence, the quiet between them comfortable and full of unspoken thoughts. Leah felt nervous but also safe. The loneliness she carried for so long began to lift like a heavy fog. James turned to her and smiled gently. "You know, Leah, I never thought I would meet someone like you on this mission," he said softly. "You have a strength that shines through, even when you don't see it yourself." Leah blinked, surprised by his words. "I have always been told I am weak," she confessed, her voice trembling, "that no one would want me because I am not perfect." James shook his head, his smile growing wider. "I don't believe in perfect, Leah. I believe in real, in people who fight and care and stand tall even when it is hard. You are real, and that matters more than anything." Her heart pounded loudly in her chest, and for the first time, she let herself imagine a life where she was enough, where her limp did not define her, where her pale skin and quiet voice were not flaws but parts of her story. Days passed, and the bond between Leah and James grew stronger. They shared stories of their worlds and hopes for the future. She taught him phrases in her language, and he showed her human songs on a small music device. Their laughter echoed in the halls and lightened the weight in her heart. But the universe had its own plans, and not all would accept their growing friendship. Whispers began to float through the ship. Strange looks followed Leah when James was not near. Doubts and fears hidden behind polite words. One day, while walking through the cargo bay, Leah overheard a human crew member say quietly, "It is strange how James favors her. I wonder if he knows what he is risking." The words stung, but Leah held her head high, remembering James's belief in her. She refused to let the fear and judgment win. That night, as she lay in her small room, Leah thought about the path ahead, uncertain, but filled with a new light. She knew challenges would come, but for the first time, she felt ready to face them. No longer alone in the vast emptiness of space. The days on the ship moved slowly, but carried a new energy for Leah. Each morning she awoke with a mix of hope and fear. The memories of her past clung to her like shadows, but James's kindness was a bright light breaking through the darkness. Today, something unexpected was about to happen that would change everything inside her. It started in the quiet common room, where Leah and James often met to work and talk. The walls were lined with screens, showing distant stars and maps of uncharted planets. The hum of the ship was steady, a soft background to their small world of words and stories. Leah was helping James understand a difficult phrase in Tharkai poetry, her voice steady but careful as she explained the meaning behind the ancient words. James listened closely, nodding and asking questions that showed he truly wanted to learn. The connection between them was growing deeper with every shared moment. Suddenly, James paused and looked at Leah with something different in his eyes. A softness mixed with admiration that made her heart skip a beat. She felt her breath catch and her cheeks warm, unsure of what he was about to say, but sensing it was important then. James spoke, his voice low and sincere. "Leah, you have the most thoughtful eyes I have ever seen." The words hung in the air like a gentle promise, simple but powerful. Something Leah had never heard, directed at her before. Her eyes widened, her body frozen. For a moment, the compliment felt like a delicate gift wrapped in hope, but also a test, because all her life she had been told she was not enough. That no one would want her, not a human or a Tharkai. These words challenged everything she believed about herself. For a long moment, neither of them spoke, the silence filled with unspoken feelings and the weight of truth. Then James smiled softly and added, "You are different, Leah, and that is not a bad thing, it is a strength." His words were gentle but full of conviction, breaking down walls she had built around her heart. Leah felt tears prick her eyes, but blinked them away quickly, her voice barely a whisper as she asked, "Why do you say that? Why would you say something so kind to me?" James looked at her steadily, his gaze unwavering. "Because I see who you really are, beyond what others say, beyond what you think about yourself. I see your courage, your kindness, your spirit." And it is beautiful. Those words wrapped around Leah like a warm blanket on a cold night. She wanted to believe them, but the voice inside her whispered doubts and fears, telling her to be careful, that this could not be true, that she was fooling herself still. Something inside her shifted. A small flame of hope flickered to life, stronger than before, promising that maybe she was worth more than the harsh words. From home, maybe she could be loved and accepted for who she was. The days that followed were filled with quiet moments between Leah and James. A growing trust that brought comfort and courage. They shared stories of their childhoods, their dreams, and fears. The ship no longer felt like a prison, but a place where Leah could breathe and begin to grow. But the world outside was watching, and not all eyes were kind. Whispers of their closeness spread among the crew and the Tharkai. Some looked on with suspicion, others with jealousy, and a few with silent hope. The tension was thick, but Leah held her ground one evening. As they prepared for a long night of study, James took Leah's hand gently and said, "I want you to know, no matter what others say or think, you are not alone, and I believe in you." Leah squeezed his hand, her heart full, but still uncertain. The road ahead was unclear and filled with challenges she could not yet see. But the weight of loneliness that had burdened her for so long was lifting, replaced by a feeling she dared to call hope. That night, as she lay in her small room looking up at the stars through the tiny window, Leah whispered to herself, "Maybe I am enough." And for the first time, she truly meant it. The ship moved steadily through the quiet vastness of space, its engines humming a constant song that filled every corner with life. Leah felt the rhythm deep inside her, a strange comfort amid the unknown. Today was not like the others. Something was about to test the trust she had begun to build with James and the crew. It began with a sudden alarm, sharp and urgent, echoing through the halls like a warning shout, lights flashing red. The peaceful routine shattered in an instant. Leah's heart jumped. She did not know what was happening, but she knew it was serious. Voices rushed through the corridors. Commands shouted, boots pounding on metal floors. Leah found herself near the cargo bay, where a group of crew members had become trapped behind a sealed door. The lock was malfunctioning, and the emergency team was struggling to open. James appeared beside her, calm but focused, his eyes scanning the panels and controls. "We need to get through the old access tunnels," he said quickly. "It's risky, but it's the only way to reach them before air runs out." Leah nodded without hesitation, her fear pushed aside by the need to help. "Show me the way," she said, her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. They moved fast through narrow tunnels designed for maintenance, the walls cold and close, the air thick with tension. Leah's limp slowed her at times, but James stayed close, steady and patient, encouraging her without words. Their teamwork like a dance in the shadows. The tunnels twisted and turned, unfamiliar and dark, but Leah's knowledge of her own people's ship design gave them an edge. She remembered old maps and safety routes from her training, leading James safely through the maze. Finally, they reached the sealed door, and James quickly worked the panel, bypassing the broken lock. The door hissed open just in time to let the trapped crew out, their faces filled with relief and gratitude. Back in the cargo bay, the rescued crew thanked Leah warmly, their respect clear in their eyes. The humans no longer saw her as a weak outsider, but as a hero who had helped save lives. Later, as they walked back through the corridors, James looked at Leah with a smile. "You were amazing back there. I couldn't have done it without you, he said sincerely, his praise filling her with a quiet pride. The other humans gathered around and nodded in agreement. Their earlier doubts replaced by admiration. Leah felt her heart swelled with something she had never known before, acceptancy at night. In the small room she now called hers, Leah thought about what had happened. The rescue had tested her courage and strength, and she had passed. But the biggest test was still to come. A message arrived from Varela, brief and cold, ordering Leah to return home immediately. Her assignment was over, and no extensions would be granted. The news hit her like a storm, ripping away the fragile hope she had begun to build. She struggled with the news, torn between duty and desire. Going home meant facing the elders and their cruel judgments again, but staying meant defying her people and risking everything she had. James found her sitting alone in the observation deck, staring out at the stars, her hands trembling, and without hesitation, he sat beside her, offering quiet support. I don't want to leave, Leah whispered, her voice breaking. But if I stay, they will call me a traitor, and I don't know if I am strong enough to face that. James reached out, taking her hand gently. You are stronger than you think, Leah, and you don't have to face anything alone. I will help you, whatever happens. His words wrapped around her like a shield, giving her the courage she needed to make a choice, to fight for the future she dreamed of. Not just for herself, but for all who had been told they were less the next day. Leah made her decision clear to the mission leaders. She would stay, work to build bridges between humans and Tharkai, and prove that worth was not measured by old rules or scars, but by the heart and actions. Leaders were shocked and warned her of consequences, but Leah stood firm, her voice steady and full of new strength. She knew this was only the beginning of her journey, but she was ready. James smiled proudly, standing beside her as a witness to her courage. The ship's crew began to see Leah, not as an outcast but as a symbol of hope and change, a new way forward for both their peoples that night. As she looked up at the stars from her room, Leah whispered a promise to herself and to James. I will not be broken. I will be more than they said I could be. The stars outside twinkled softly, as if answering her vow, and Leah felt a quiet peace settle in her heart, ready to face the trials ahead with courage and hope. Asterisk. The news of Leah's decision to stay spread quickly through the ship and across the communication channels that linked them to Vir. The elders wasted no time sending back their disapproval. Their message was sharp and cold. They warned her that she was defying the will of her people and risking exile. They reminded her again of her place. The words cut deep, but did not break. Still the weight of the choice pressed on her like heavy chains. She walked through the corridors of the human ship, feeling the stares of both humans and Tharkai, some full of support, others full of suspicion. She tried to keep her head high, but inside she battled fear and doubt. Each step felt like walking a thin bridge above an endless drop. James noticed the change in her mood and found her in the quiet corner of the observation deck. The stars stretched endlessly before them, a sea of light and shadow. He did not speak at first, only stood beside her until she was ready to talk. They want me to come back right now, Leah said finally, her voice low and tired. They say I have no right to make my own choice. They say I am bringing shame to my family. They say I am nothing. James turned to her with steady eyes, his voice calm but strong. You are not nothing, Leah. You are more than they can see. You are brave, you are kind, you are strong, and you have the right to choose your own life. His words gave her a moment of warmth in the cold storm of doubt, but the fear still lingered. She knew that if she stayed, it would mean she could never go home again. Never see the few places on Varela that had given her comfort. Never walk in the gardens she had loved as a child. Never sit in the archive, where she had read stories of humans for the first time. That night, she lay in her small room, unable to sleep. The hum of the ship steady in the background. She closed her eyes and remembered the faces of the elders, the cruel laughter of the girls who had mocked her, the distant gaze of her parents. She also remembered James's smile, his words, the way he had looked at her as if she was worth something. Precious morning came with a soft knock at her door. James stood there holding a small device. I have something for you, he said with a gentle smile. He pressed the button, and a message appeared in the air. It was a video of him speaking directly to Heron. The recording, James's voice was full of warmth. Leah, I don't know how your people see you, but I see someone brave, someone who cares, someone who matters. I see the way you fight for others even when you are afraid. I see the way you learn and teach with patience. You are important, and I don't want you to forget that. Leah watched the message twice, then a third time, her chest tight with emotion. She had never been spoken to like that before, never been told she mattered in such clear and honest words. Tears filled her eyes, but she did not wipe them away later. That day she walked alone through the halls of the ship, thinking about her choice. Her steps took her to the training area, where humans and SciFi worked side by side. She saw the way they exchanged skills and knowledge, the way they laughed despite their differences, and she felt a spark of hope, that maybe she could be part of building something better than what she had left behind. When she returned to the observation deck, James was waiting. He asked no questions, only looked at her and waited for her to speak. She took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly. "I will not go back," she said, her voice firm. "I will stay and do what I can here. I will not live by their cruel rules any longer." James smiled with quiet pride. "Then we face this together," he said simply. And in that moment, Leah felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The fear did not disappear completely, but it no longer controlled her. The decision was made. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time the choice was hers, not forced by others, not decided in a cold room by distant voices. Hers alone that night. She stood under the vast stars and whispered into the silence. "I am not worthless. I am not broken. I choose my own life." The stars above seemed to shine brighter, as if they had heard her vow and answered with light asterisk. The human ship moved through the endless dark with a steady hum, while Leah stood at the wide window of the observation deck, watching the stars drift slowly past her mind, still trying to believe. The choice she had made, her chest feeling both light and heavy at the same time. She had no home now, not in the way she once knew it, but she felt something else, too, a strange feeling that perhaps she was finally free. James had kept his promise to stand by her, and soon word spread through the crew about her decision. Many humans welcomed her with friendly nods and warm smiles. Some SciFi looked at her with surprise, even admiration. A few still whispered behind her back, but the sharp sting of their judgment no longer cut as deep as it once had. She had taken her first step into a life that belonged to her alone, and there was no turning back. The days that followed were filled with learning and work. She joined the humans in their training sessions, her natural agility making her a quick student in the use of human tools and tactics. She studied human culture and history in the ship's library, listening to old recordings of music, reading simple stories told by human voices. She laughed quietly to herself at how different, and yet, how similar they were to her own people. But not all was calm. Outside the safety of the ship, tensions were rising between human fleets and a rival. Alien faction reports came in of attacks on supply routes, and James told her that they might soon be called to defend the sector. Leah listened in silence, feeling the cold edge of fear, but also a burning need to help in any way she could. She did not want to be the frightened shadow she had been on Varela. She wanted to be useful. She wanted to be strong. One evening, James found her in the engineering bay, studying the layout of the ship's reactor systems. He raised an eyebrow, impressed, thinking of becoming an engineer now. He teased. She smiled a little shyly. "Maybe if I can learn enough, I can help keep the ship alive when it matters." Her voice was quiet, but her eyes were steady. James nodded and offered to connect her with one of the ship's chief engineers, who could teach her more. The lessons were hard and sometimes frustrating, but Leah pushed herself to keep going. She made mistakes, burned her fingers once, and even accidentally shut down a secondary power relay. But each failure only made her more determined to improve. She began to see herself not as someone who was barely tolerated, but as a part of something larger, a team that counted on her. Weeks passed, and the call finally came, a distress signal from a human convoy under attack. The ship changed course at once, and the crew prepared for action. Leah stood at her station in the engineering bay, her heart pounding as the alarm lights flashed red. The captain's voice echoed through the speakers, steady and clear, giving orders. The first wave of enemy fire shook the ship. Hardly grabbed the edge of the console to steady herself. Alarms blared as one of the engines took damage. She listened to the frantic reports from other engineers and began rerouting power to stabilize the drive. James's voice came through the comms. "Leah, we need that engine back online, or we will be sitting ducks." Her hands flew over the controls, her mind focused on every wire and conduit she had studied during her lessons. She ignored the fear clawing at her chest and concentrated only on the task. Finally, the readout steadied. The engine roared back to life, and the ship surged forward. The relief in James's voice when he reported their regained mobility warmed her more than she expected. The battle raged on, but with the ship back at full strength, they managed to break through the enemy line and escort the convoy to safety. Cheers erupted across the comms, but Leah stayed in the engineering bay for a moment, staring at the steady pulse of the engine. She had helped save. She realized she had done more than just watch from the sidelines. She had made a real difference. That night, as the crew gathered to celebrate the victory, James found her leaning quietly against the wall. He handed her a drink and smiled. "You did more than anyone could have asked for, Leah. She felt her throat tighten, but she nodded softly. "I belong here," she whispered, almost to herself. James heard, and his smile widened. "Yes, you do." The stars outside the ship seemed closer than before, brighter somehow. She knew there would be more battles ahead, more challenges, more moments where she would have to prove herself, but she no longer feared them. The girl who had once been told she was unwanted had found her place, not because someone had given it to her, but because she had claimed it with her own hands.